All right, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Daniel Teacher's Experience. Let's talk about why most men don't go to therapy. Most therapists are women. More women than men go to therapy. More women than men even just go to any healthcare provider. That includes dentists, that includes family doctor. Now, why is that? One of the big reasons is because there's a lot of common held beliefs about therapy, what it is versus what it isn't, and what we're supposed to get from a counselor. Is therapy useful? How can you have people who are in therapy for 2 years and they still haven't gotten better? How can you have someone who's depressed, he goes to therapy for 5 years and then he kills himself? It's like, well, that worked great. How about when you give someone medication so that they feel better and they get addicted to that medication? Why don't more men go to therapy? There's a gentleman by the name of Andrew Tate who I think puts it in a brilliant way. Now, this is going to be one of the rare reaction videos that I do. And the point of this is not Andrew Tate. It's never the individual. It is the ideas. It is the concepts, because I know that they're very common, especially amongst men, especially amongst young men. So I really want to talk about those and listen to those. And if you've never seen this video, heard this video, sit down, or if you're driving or if you're working out, because it's pretty interesting. Like, he says certain things that you might think are crazy. And he also says some things that you think, yeah, Daniel, like that makes absolute sense to me. So without further ado, I'm going to play the video. We're going to go through it bit by bit and then talk about it. All right. If you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able to see the screen. If you're just listening to this on podcast audio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, it'll just be the audio, but that's fine. Make sure that's good. Yep. Awesome. Right. Here we go.
Therapy. If you've been watching my channel for long enough, you know that I have a gripe with many things. And I'm always right. I'm eternally correct. If I have a gripe with something, then that something is in trouble, because my logic is infallible. And I have a genuine problem with therapy as a whole. What is therapy? Well, therapy is the idea that you need to go through life crying about the bad things that have happened to you, to some other mortal being as if they are God, and that somehow that makes things better. You need to go to some other normal human with their own problems, who's no better than you, and sit there and go, oh, this happened, that happened, and that somehow this inaction is going to improve your life.
Okay, really good. So the first thing that he said was, what is therapy? His definition of therapy is this: you cry to an immortal being, someone who is above all, who is invincible, who's this God, who's perfect and invincible. You cry about your problems, and then he gives you the one fix-all solution, and that's somehow supposed to make your life better. And then he adds on, because he's being sarcastic, he goes, look, that guy also gets anxious. That guy probably also has his own problems. He's probably addicted to drugs. He gets arguments with his wife. He may be cheating on his partner. So that person who's got a messed up life is going to try to give you the perfect answer in life. That's his definition of therapy, okay? That is the definition for a lot of people listening, so he's not alone. Let's keep listening to see what Mr. Tate has to say.
My largest problems with therapy is that it's an antithesis to my worldview. And my worldview is that action always wins. Momentum, speed, power, forward, forward, forward. Anyone who's done business with me knows the first thing I say is, okay, good idea. How quickly is it done? The sooner it's done, the sooner it makes money. If it takes 2 days instead of 1 day, that's one extra day we've lost we can never make money during. You want to be a millionaire, do things quickly. Action wins. Therapy is not action.
Okay, right there. Really good point. In his mind, he really views action as number one. I made a video about this months ago. I don't know if you remember. It was about understanding, particularly for men, that the things that work in the workplace, they don't translate so well in your relationships. In a workplace environment, you don't have time to sit down and to think about how people feel and really think about hearing the other person out, even though those sound super important. You're so focused on problem solving, black and white logical thinking, that everything else goes to the side. So I've given the example of like that guy with that problem solving attitude goes home. He sees that his girlfriend's upset. He buys her flowers. He takes her out to dinner. Maybe he buys her something else. And then he goes, how do you feel now? And she goes, well, I'm still kind of upset. And he goes, what more do you want me to do? Like, how do I solve this problem? When sometimes the best thing to do, the solution, is just to listen. So this is a common theme that I see where people take that same problem solving mentality. And then when you're in a relationship that is just built on like, I want to feel understood. And if you just let me talk for 10, 15 minutes and you communicate to me that you understand how I feel and where I'm coming from, dude, that's like 50% of the problem solved. Ask your lady friends. Seriously. And let me know what they say. But in his view, again, he's saying action and he goes talking. He doesn't see that as problem solving. That's not action, that's inaction.
Therapy is sitting and crying and complaining. Talk is not action. A fucking chit chat isn't action. Is it, G? No. G knows. Action is doing something. If you feel depressed, G, you're going to spill fucking coffee and you're ruining my Tate speech. Piss off. If you feel depressed, you go to the gym. You do something. You don't sit and cry about it. Oh, I feel depressed. Let's go sit and have a talk. Words don't count as action, not in the harsh realm of reality. So,
listen to what he just said. If you feel depressed, you don't cry about it. You go to the gym. Okay. If you think you broke your ankle, you don't go to the doctor. Walk it off, son. These snowflakes nowadays. So what? You got a 4th degree burn, you don't go to the doctor. Put some water on it. Do you see where I'm going with this? So that's what kind of his mentality is. And he uses the word depression. And unfortunately, I don't want to take him out of context, but sometimes you have people who get bummed out, who get upset. And I believe he's referring to the people who go, look, your buddy goes and he fails a test, right? And it sucks and he feels bummed out. So you go, hey man, let's go out for a drink. Let's go hit the gym and then let's go out like somewhere to eat. That is totally different than someone who's been diagnosed by a doctor to be clinically depressed, where they're upset every day to the point where they don't have any reason to get out of bed. And it's bigger than just, oh, so they're just lazy. It's like the brain is very, very, very complex. So when someone says, you know, oh, he's depressed, she's depressed, if you're depressed, go to the gym, be careful. Think, what do you mean by that? What do you mean when you say the word depressed?
So that's one of the first problems I have with therapy. The second problem I have with therapy is therapists don't want you to get better.
Wait, real quick, what was this last part that he said?
Words don't count as action, not in the harsh realm of reality. So that's one.
Debatable. If you look at the definition of action and of behavior, talking is a behavior. And the literature shows that there's a very close link between our thoughts, our emotions, what we say, and what we do. Our thoughts, our emotions, what we say, and what we do. If I think I'm a loser and I will never amount to anything in life, I'm going to feel terrible about it. And my self-esteem is going to plummet, right? When that happens, I'm going to start verbalizing that. I'm a loser. She's too good for me anyway. I'm not good enough for the job interview anyway. And finally, I act on it. I'm not even going to apply for the job interview. I'm not even going to ask that girl out because I already know the answer to both of those is no. So they're all connected. So actually, man, talking by definition isn't action. It is a behavior. It's a thing that you're doing. Now, in the greater context, I believe what Mr. Tate here is alluding to is the individual who says, I'm going to start working out versus the person who actually goes and works out, right? One person's just talking about it while the other person's doing the thing, right? It's not just empty words, but there's substance behind it because you follow through on what you said you were going to do. So I believe that's what he's referring to. But mind you, think about everything that talking is. And he doesn't see that as action. Talking could be telling someone about your problems. Talking could be booking an appointment with someone to get help. Talking could include making a plan with someone. Yeah, man, look, I'm going to start working out 3 times a week. I'm going to do legs Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm going to do upper bodies on Fridays. That's talking. But he doesn't view that as action. Making a routine, looking to the future, checking in with someone, with a coach, with an instructor. Hey, man, how'd it go last week? Oh, it went really well. He doesn't view that as action. Keep that in mind.
One of the first problems I have with therapy. The second problem I have with therapy is therapists don't want you to get better. Therapists want little piles of goo they can poke at, little weak individuals they can just poke at and ask stupid questions to. We're going to pay an hourly rate forever. It's not in their business model to improve your life. It doesn't make any sense. They just want to sit there and let you just talk shit as long as it takes. What's crazy about this is, how can you go and sit in front of a therapist and not cross your mind that this...
Okay, he's about to get to a second point here. So this point here is like, look, from a business model, it doesn't make sense. In order for you to have customers, there has to be a problem. And then your service or your product or your knowledge and skills, they have to solve that problem. And if you can solve that problem on a micro scale, on a mass scale, ladies and gentlemen, you can make some money, right? That could be planes, right? The problem of connecting, like the guy who thought about flying planes, it wasn't just like, oh, it'd be nice to fly. It's like, what's another avenue that you could connect with people who live a long way away, who live over the ocean? That's a problem. Like, what if you can't get on a boat? How can you get across? So these are problems that we think of simply as like, look, McDonald's, problem solving. It's 1 a.m. somewhere. You got $2 in your pocket and you're hungry. You know, you could get a junior chicken for like $1.47, right? That's problem solving on a mass scale. So he's sitting there going, look, if I'm your psychologist, I don't ever want you to get better. Because if you do, well, then I can't sue anyone. I can't get your money. So I hope that you just keep on talking and we do therapy for 10 years and you never get better. That's his kind of business model, right? So think about that from an ethical perspective. Think about what he puts first, not the person's feelings and their well-being and how that's impacting their family, but money oriented. There needs to be a problem for me to give you a solution. But if I can milk you for 3, 4, 5 years and just have you talk, I can just make money. Why solve your problem in 6 months when I can talk to you for 5 years? So that's that point. Now listen to this.
This therapist has a bullshit life anyway. All these therapists are getting divorces and cheating on their fucking wives and are just as depressed as you. If therapists understand psychology so well, why are they not all living these perfect, ideal lives? Well, they're not, because they don't know shit. The idea that therapy is somehow necessary or...
Okay, next point, which is very good. You're sitting there and you're talking to a guy. Okay, imagine you're talking to a friend of yours, because this is actually a very good point. And he's giving you relationship advice. Look, man, relationship is important. It's based on trust. It's based on loyalty. And then you go, yeah, by the way, what happened with you and Sarah? And he goes, yeah, we ended things. And I go, oh, man, why? I go, yeah, I cheated on her. Well, wait a minute, you cheated on her? You're going to talk to me about loyalty and trust and this, and you cheated on... Am I getting advice from the right person? TikTok is full of this stuff. There'll be a dude who gives parenting advice and relationship advice. Turns out he's a single dad. It's like, oh, okay, well, clearly I'm not going to follow your advice because I'm going to lead to that outcome. Unless you're telling me what not to do and the new things that you've learned, right? Things that led you to become... Look, not to... I'm heavily judging because I don't know that person, but I've seen a lot of these places where someone's giving you advice about something. Like, it'd be crazy if I talked about the importance of trust and being honest with people if you knew I had a history of cheating on romantic partners, right? It'd be hard to conceptualize. Here's the problem with that. These are so common. These are so normal. And there's a counselor in Ontario who made a video about this. She was like, look, going to your counselor, right? And then finding out that, let's say they've had anxiety issues and saying, I'm not going to get advice from you, is like going to a medical doctor and finding out he's gotten a cold before. Like, you go to your medical doctor and like, hey doc, I don't feel too well. He's like, yeah, I didn't feel too well either last week. Like, oh my God, Dr. Bellingham, you got sick last week? If you're a doctor and if you've studied 10 years worth of medicine, why do you still get sick? How do you still get the flu? How do you still break bones? How do you get arthritis? Right? And we kind of make this idea, like this leap from, if you're a professional, then those things that are super common should never affect you. If you're a counselor or psychologist, you should never get anxious. You should never get into a conflict with your partner. You should never have suicidal thoughts at some point in your life. I don't believe that's the case. I think it's actually a lot more common. Again, same thing with the medical doctor, right? Doesn't mean you're never going to have injuries. Doesn't mean you're never going to be in a place where you need surgery done for whatever reason. It happens. But Mr. Tate's view on this, and a lot of people's view, is like, look, man, your marriage is messed up. Maybe you're a counselor and you're a divorce counselor. Now you're going to give me relationship advice? Get out of here, son. So that's really where that mindset comes from.
Mandatory is just new age Western garbage. The thing with all this new age shit is that some things should be universal across the human condition. If therapy was so necessary, it would have been necessary forever. The fact that it wasn't necessary before and is now necessary means it's new think, new age, and you've been conditioned to believe that you need it. People survived without it for a very, very long time. Therapy is not necessary. Action versus inaction.
Be careful. So what he's saying here is he's going, look, if therapy was so important, it would have been important since the dawn of time. Therapy is a new age thing. Rather than the last 150 years or so, we've really looked at 100, yeah, let's say 100 to 150 years, because I know Sigmund Freud was really big in the year 1920. He was one of the big ones that actually went and became a medical doctor first, and therefore medical doctor went into psychology because of how many of his patients he was helping with what he would call talk therapy. And he was the big guy who looked at the unconscious mind and repressed memories and defense mechanisms, lying on the couch, talking freely. So his idea is like, look, if therapy was so essential, he's saying that it's a modernized thing. Like this idea that therapy is like mandatory and it should be necessary is ridiculous. If it was that important, it would have always been necessary. Here's the problem with that argument. I shouldn't say that. Here's another perspective. Just because we've done something a certain way doesn't mean that change isn't necessary or isn't needed. The way that people worked out has changed over time. The diets that we've been recommended has changed over time. Cigarette smoking, if you think about how that happened, how popular it was, how that's changed over time. If you look at things like rights, how that's changed over time. And we've come to understand that it is necessary and it is better. And also, we have to be careful, folks. The idea of therapy and mental health has been around for hundreds of years, but it just looked differently. So because we didn't have the science to back it up, they would say things like, we have to release the demons from you, or you have these troubled thoughts. But the idea of mental health has been around for a super long time. Anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, an extremely long time. Like I can't even, but they would say like he's gone crazy, right? The only difference now is that we have broadened the scope of what mental health means, right? We used to be in a place where we said, look, if you hear voices, you're insane. But if you went through like a traumatic car crash, like you're just being overly sensitive, you should move on. Gradually, we've expanded the ball of what mental health can be. So we went, hey, you know how those soldiers got PTSD? They used to call it shell shocked when they came back from the war. Maybe that can happen on other occasions. Maybe there can be other traumatic events. Maybe if you were sexually assaulted, maybe if you were in a bad car accident, you can develop PTSD. You can have certain triggers. Then we need to condition that stuff out of you. So this term has just really expanded. So now when you have people go to a counselor for things like stress, overworking, burnout, anxiety, these, I would argue, have always existed. But it's just we as a society are understanding like, oh, like you should get help for this. Like this is so complex to the point where we have to send someone to school for 6+ years so they can assist you in getting to where you want to go. So I would add that we're definitely moving to a place where mental health, counseling, therapy is definitely becoming an almost essential or necessary part of life. I've always said, I think everybody should go to counseling, like once a year at least. Just go check in 5-10 minutes. Hey man, how's it going? Any new life updates? Anything you want to share with me? But it's always been around. But I would agree with Mr. Tate that it's the definition of what can I go to counseling for has never been so wide. It could be anything from school stress. It could be from me and my boyfriend are having troubles. It could be from I'm going to be a father, like my wife is going to give birth in about 2 months. I'm going to be a father. I feel anxious. So the scope has widened drastically.
Therapists live in a world of inaction, to sit and chit-chat and talk and discuss. Maybe, tell me when you were 12, that time you had that orange juice, like, who gives a shit? I live in a world of action, and you know what action is? Physical force. Action. Me standing up is real action. Me whooping someone's ass is real action. Sitting there having a chit-chat and writing things down is inaction. Therapists live in a world of inaction, I live in a world of action. And as I said at the beginning, action always trumps inaction. Robin Williams is my test case. Robin Williams.
Action is always better than inaction. Think about that.
Williams is the case people often come to me and say, well, if depression isn't real, why did Robin Williams kill himself? Well, I'll tell you why. Therapy is why. Robin Williams did 12 years of therapy. For 12 years, not only was he taking mind-altering antidepressant drugs, which is a video in and of itself, why I'll never do antidepressants, but on top of that, every single day he's sitting there with a therapist. If you sit in front of someone all day, every day, and talk about all the bad things that have ever happened to you all day, every day, you're gonna feel pissed off. Even I would want to jump off a fucking bridge if I spent 12 years talking to some dickhead about all the bad things that's happened in my life. It's detrimental. Sitting there crying about bad things is never gonna help you. If you're the kind of person who feels like they need therapy, you need someone to talk to make me feel better, do you know what you are? You're useless. Because in the harshest realities of this cold world, there are people in Syria whose entire families have been blown to fuck with a bomb from the sky, who are still getting up every day, making bread and selling it on the streets so they have enough money to buy a new pair of sandals sometime next year. While you're crying about nothing with your first world bullshit to some therapist who probably does coke on the weekends.
Okay, there was a lot of information there. Let's go back just a little bit. When he was talking about Robin Williams, here's the important thing to take note. The argument is this. If you go to therapy, then you should get better. Robin Williams went to therapy. He didn't get better. Therefore, therapy doesn't work. That's the conclusion. Here's another very similar argument. If you go to chemotherapy, you should survive cancer. My friend had cancer and went to therapy. He didn't survive. Therefore, chemotherapy does not work. Sit with that. This next part is something I talked about, man, months ago. This idea of, and this is something that I used to do, not only to myself, but to my friends. I would think to myself, man, this sucks, dude. I failed this test. I feel terrible. And then a voice in my head would be like, Daniel, this, it doesn't matter. There's people out there who would what they wouldn't give for a chance to be at a school that you're at. You're so lucky, you're so blessed, you're healthy, you've got a roof over your head. The problem with that mentality is it doesn't solve the original problem. I made a video that says how you should talk to someone who's, I don't know what it was called, who's down or who's bummed out, who is depressed. And I said, look, if you come to me and you say, Daniel, I'm hungry. And I go, there's plenty of kids in Africa that are hungry. Okay. That doesn't change the fact that I'm still hungry. Me saying, look, you shouldn't be hungry because there's a lot of people out there who eat less than you. And you'll say, well, Daniel, there's a lot of people out there who eat better than me, who eat more than me. Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you hear how I'm invalidating your experience? So if you go to someone, you go, look, man, I'm depressed. I'm not doing too well. My girlfriend left me that same week. My mother passed away, or it doesn't even have to be that big. The thing here is a lot of people are like, oh, my situation isn't that crazy. No one's dying, but what's matter is if it's big to you, then it's a big deal. For you, failing a test can make you so anxious and so stressed out and burned out that you got to go speak to a counselor. You don't have to wait for someone to pass away or your girlfriend to leave you. And if in that moment I was to be like, look, well, I fail tests all the time and I'm fine. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. And if you think failing a test is a big deal, who am I to tell you otherwise? Now, take that with a grain of salt, right? Take that, people play on this line. I'm just really exaggerating because I want you to think of it from the other person's perspective. So every time I pull an example from, well, kids in Africa are starving and I failed plenty of tests, it's not about them, it's about you. And there's a time and a place for that, to count our blessings. But when someone comes in the moment, they're like, I'm upset because of X. Me saying, well, look, plenty of people don't have X. It has nothing to do with you. That doesn't address your situation at all. Because what I'm essentially saying is, look, it is what it is. What are you going to do about it? Nothing, so stop complaining. Is there something wrong with that answer? I'll let you sit on that. Let's go back a little.
Therapist who probably does coke on the weekends. My final point on therapy is as follows. It is detrimental. Not only is it useless, not only is it not science, not only is it bullshit, it actually makes people worse. The worst thing you can do if you have a problem is sit and talk about it all day.
Not only does therapy not help, but it makes it worse. The worst thing you can do is to talk about a problem that you have all day. There's a lot of people listening that will agree with that. They'll go, look, Daniel, if something bad happens, I'm not going to sit there and talk about it all day. That's just going to bum me out more. I'm more likely to just throw it to the back of my head and go on with my day.
People say you shouldn't bury your problems because if you repress them, that's bullshit. World War II, how many people died? Did everyone sit around and fucking go, oh, we don't have time to rebuild all the cities and create the NHS. We need to sit and talk about all the bad things that's happened. Every single person has a horror story, from Russia to Germany through France, England, America, the Japanese, the Philippines. Everyone has something bad to say. So let's somehow clone the entire population of Earth so we have enough therapists and sit there and talk all day instead of getting shit done. Bullshit. People shut up and they got shit done. There's nothing wrong with fucking having something bad happen to you, internalizing it the best you can, maybe speaking about it with someone close to you, but in general, just shutting.
I got him. Did you hear that? I shouldn't say I got him. That's inappropriate. But at the very, he's like, look, it doesn't matter. Internalize it. Go after it. Action. And then he puts in that little sense of maybe talk to someone close to you. Did you hear that? It was very subtle. But even Mr. Tate, who is so get blank done and I'm a badass in action, I don't believe in inaction, he put in that little sentence to go in and maybe talk to someone close about it. Like, oh, okay. Okay. So even you, sir, you have a mother, a father, a trusted friend, a coworker that you open up to, or that you believe that you tell people is important to open up to. It's like, okay, my curiosity is, what if you don't have that person? Or what if your relationship is not appropriate in a way where you can disclose that amount of information? But what is really saying is like, look, we can't just all sit around and just talk about the things that make us feel terrible for 10 hours a day. You could complain all day, every day about the things that happen to you at work. Do you want to be that guy who complains all the time? And you're listening to this, maybe you go, yes, it makes me feel better. Maybe you go, no. I don't want to be that guy, Daniel, who complains all day. It's like, fair enough, dude. And his idea is like, look, man, sitting there and ruminating is just, you're playing the terrible mistakes over and over again in your head, isn't going to make anything better. Okay, for the whole day. Now, it's a little paradoxical because on the flip side of that, studies show that it's very clear if you're dealing with something terrible and you sit down and you either write about it in depth or you talk to someone, whether it be a friend or a therapist, it makes you feel better. Like that stuff about repressed memories and stuff, man, it works. There was something in the literature that says a husband and wife should at least, I'm going to mess up the numbers, but they should have at least an hour and a half to 2 hours time of just nonstop talking, where one person talks about all their problems for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then it's the other person's turn, some point throughout the week, just to make sure that they're still checking in, they're both still feeling heard, the level of communication is being met, whatever it may be. So there's definitely a point of, look, what's complaining going to do about it? You don't want to be that guy that complains every day. But on the other hand, it definitely says in the literature goes, look, man, I promise you that if therapy wasn't this successful, we would have changed things drastically in the last 10, 15 years. But if you look at cognitive behavioral therapy, if you look at even some hypnotic therapy, some meditative therapy, it's doing well. It's working for a lot of people. That doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone, but there are definitely things that show that when you talk to someone, it makes you feel better. Now, there's a huge difference between talking to someone for an hour, writing things down for 30 minutes, versus you're complaining for the next 5 hours. My life sucks. This is terrible. Does that make sense? Was there any last bit here? I don't think so. I think he's just mouthing off.
Analyzing it the best you can, maybe speaking about it with someone close to you, but in general, just shutting the fuck up and getting on with it. Therapy is detrimental.
Right. There you have it. His last words were therapy is detrimental, which means therapy is hurtful. These are actually extremely common held beliefs. This idea, like, why should I sit there? Why should I think about all the things that are going badly in my life? And it's a very common belief. And I want to stay unbiased, but I can't. Like, it's literally impossible. And my own ideas bleed through. But I want you to make your own conclusions up from that video. And whatever I say and whatever that gentleman says, take it with a grain of salt. Again, it's not about him. It's about the ideology. It's about the beliefs that he presents. And I want you to think about, what does action mean to you? What do you think about complaining? What do you think about talking to someone for help? Have you ever been in a space where you talked to someone about something that was bothering you? How did you feel afterwards? Did you feel better? Did you feel worse? Maybe it was indifferent. Maybe you opened up, it felt like they didn't care. How many times have you opened up to someone about, hey, this is what happened to me at work? And then they immediately go, oh yeah, let me tell you about what happened to me at work the other day. How does that make you feel when they immediately flip the story and they make it about them? Hey man, I failed this test today and I feel pretty terrible. Yeah, well, this one time I failed the test and I felt pretty terrible. How does that feel? Now, when you're in a relationship, it goes 50-50. You share, it should, if it's a balanced one, you share 50%, they share 50%, unless it's a parent and child, in which it's mostly the other way, like the parent is the emotional support for the child, for the 5-year-old, and hopefully it's never the opposite way, where the parent is dependent on the child. But that is not the case for a therapist. The difference between being a therapist and being a friend is it's just one way. When you talk to a therapist, he's not going to say, yeah, well, I filled a test. No, he's going to listen to you. It's pretty rare that they self-disclose. And if they do, it's for a specific reason. So that's a one-way communication. Whereas if you're talking to a buddy of yours, it's very natural for it to go both ways. You see something, he says something, you see something, he says something, so you both feel heard. But if you go to a counselor or a therapist, it's all about you. It's all about you. My own worry is that young men are going to see that video, and if it resonates with them and they don't know much about psychology or counseling, they're going to be like, yeah, man, like screw therapy. Like that stuff just sucks. Like why would I ever want to do that? Why would I ever just want to complain to someone? Like I want to get stuff done. I believe in actions, not inactions. And that is a huge reason that I think young people get pushed away from doing therapy. Should you go to therapy? Who am I to tell you? I have my own beliefs. But if I go to therapy, it doesn't really matter. Like if I think that you should go to therapy, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, do you think you should go? Is it appropriate for you to go? Is it worthwhile going? Are they just there for your money? Is it just complaining all day? Those are things you got to make up for yourself. I can tell you that the literature shows that there are improvements. There are people who go to therapy and feel much better. Anything from anger issues to anxiety issues to depression to suicide ideation. That doesn't mean it works for everyone. That doesn't mean that their first counselor is a perfect match. Sometimes they go to first, no, wasn't for me, second wasn't for me. Oh, the third one, we just really see eye to eye. He really understands me, and then they stick with him. So that's up to you to decide. Folks, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the podcast. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and let me know if you want some more of these reaction videos. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.